Section 2-2, conditional statements. So a conditional statement is also known as an if-then statement. A nice example of an if-then statement is, if I am Peter Pan, then I can fly. The reason we look at if-then statements in geometry and whether they are true is because it is the foundation for reasoning, and it will be the base for proofs and sort of give us a way of thinking in geometry. So like I said before, a conditional is an if-then statement. So you might remember that I told you that mathematicians are kind of lazy, so we always like to come up with shorthand for things. So the way that we write a conditional in mathematical shorthand is we go P, arrow, Q. And so P will represent a statement, Q will represent a statement, and then this arrow here is the then. So the way that we would read this out loud would be if P, then Q. Let's go ahead and look at the example that I used the first time around. So my example was, if I am Peter Pan, then I can fly. So using our mathematical shorthand that we just learned, if I am Peter Pan would be statement P, and I can fly would be statement Q, and then here, this would be our arrow. So I would be able to write this out. If I am Peter Pan, then I can fly. Let's go ahead and look at the parts of a conditional statement. So we had the notation if P, then Q. So the first part of a conditional statement is going to be the hypothesis, and that is the P part of the statement. It follows if in the statement. So, looking back at our example, if I am Peter Pan, then I can fly, we said this was P, if P, then Q. So, if I am Peter Pan, this is going to be my hypothesis. So, if I am Peter Pan is my hypothesis. Let's look at the second part of a conditional statement. That's going to be the conclusion. So, the conclusion is the Q part of the statement. So looking at our example again, if I am Peter Pan, then I can fly. We labeled this as Q before. And so this is going to be our conclusion. It's the part that follows then. Alright, let's get some practice with some conditional statements. So these are going to be the ones that you want to copy into your notes. So, for the following, identify the hypothesis and the conclusion in each statement. So our first statement is going to be, if an animal is a robin, then the animal is a bird. So your job is to copy this statement down into your notes, and then you're going to underline what you think is the hypothesis, you're going to underline what you think is the conclusion, and then you can label it either using P and Q like we talked about before, or you can just label it hypothesis and conclusion, whatever is going to be easiest for you. So go ahead and pause the video and take a second to copy this down and label the parts hypothesis and conclusion. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to take a look at it on your own, let's go over it together. So first, we want to look for the hypothesis, which is the P part of the statement. It follows the word if in an if-then statement. So looking at our statement, if an animal is a robin, there we go. So this is going to be the P in our statement. It's the hypothesis. Okay, and then we're going to look for our conclusion. So the conclusion is the Q part of the statement. It follows then. So if an animal is a robin, then the animal is a bird. This is the Q part of our statement. This is the conclusion. Let's go ahead and do one more. So our next statement is, if an angle measures 130 degrees, then the angle is obtuse. So your job right now is you're going to copy this statement down into your notes, and you're going to underline the hypothesis, underline the conclusion, and then you can label it as either P and Q, like we've been practicing, or you can label it as hypothesis and conclusion, whichever is going to be good for your notes. So go ahead and pause the video and take care of that now. So now that you've had a chance to work on that on your own, let's go ahead and go over it together. So we're looking for our hypothesis, which is the P part of the statement. It follows the word if in an if-then statement. So if an angle measures 130 degrees, this is going to be our P statement. This is the hypothesis part of our conditional statement. Now we're going to look for our conclusion in the statement. So the conclusion is the Q part, or it follows the word then. So if an angle measures 130 degrees, then the angle is obtuse. So this is going to be the Q part of our statement. This is the conclusion in our statement. All right, so now we're going to take a look at what it takes to write a conditional statement. So first, when we're writing a conditional statement, if we're given a statement and then asked to turn it into a conditional, what we're going to do is we're going to identify the hypothesis, which, if we remember, is the P part of the statement, and then we'll identify the conclusion, which is the Q part of the statement. From there, we're going to plug in if, and then, and any other words that we're going to need to make this sound like a proper English sentence. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example. The statement that we're given is vertical angles share a vertex, and we are asked to turn it into a conditional. So like I said before, we want to first identify our hypothesis and conclusion. So hypothesis here is going to be vertical angles, and then conclusion is going to be share a vertex. So vertical angles is the P of my statement, and share a vertex is the Q of my statement. So then, if I rewrite this, I'm going to write it as if two angles are vertical, and notice that I added in a couple of extra words to just make it sound nice. Then those angles share a vertex. And we have turned our original statement here, vertical angles share a vertex, into a lovely conditional statement. If two angles are vertical, then those angles share a vertex. It's everyone's favorite time. It's time to practice the skills that we've learned. So let's take a look at a couple of statements and we'll try to turn them into conditional statements. Our first one is going to be dolphins are mammals. So your job right now is you're going to copy this into your notebook. You're going to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion in the statement, and then you're going to try to rewrite it as a conditional statement. So go ahead and pause the video, copy this down, identify hypothesis and conclusion, and rewrite it as a conditional. Now that you've had some time to work on this on your own, we're going to go over it together. So our first step is to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the hypothesis here is going to be dolphins, and our conclusion is going to be mammals. So if I rewrite this as a conditional statement, if an animal is a dolphin, so there's my hypothesis, then that animal is a mammal. And there is the conclusion part of my conditional statement. So I took the statement, dolphins are mammals, I identified my hypothesis and my conclusion, and I turned it into the conditional statement. If an animal is a dolphin, then that animal is a mammal. Let's go ahead and try another one. So our next statement that I want you to turn into a conditional statement is going to be, I can see when I wear my glasses. So your job now is you're going to copy this statement down into your notebook, and then you're going to identify hypothesis and conclusion, and then you're going to try to rewrite it as a conditional statement. Go ahead and pause the video and take care of that. Now that you've had a chance to work on this by yourself, let's go ahead and take a look at it together. So first we want to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So hypothesis is going to be, I can see, and then conclusion is going to be, I wear my glasses. So if I try to rewrite this now as a conditional statement, I would write, if I can see, so there's my hypothesis right there, then I am wearing my glasses, and that's my conclusion right there. So to recap, I took this statement here that I was given, if I can see when I wear my glasses, I identified the hypothesis and identified the conclusion, and I turned it into this conditional statement here, if I can see, then I am wearing my glasses.